The disappearance of Natalee Holloway, Birmingham, Alabama, Oranjestad, Aruba, 2005. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the Aruban sky in hues of blood, orange, and violet. It was May 30, 2005, and the island of Oranjestad buzzed with the carefree laughter of American teenagers, their voices mingling with the pulse of Caribbean music. Among them was Natalee Holloway, an 18-year-old from Mountain Brook, Alabama, her blonde hair catching the light as she danced, unaware that this night would be her last. She was here to celebrate her high school graduation, a rite of passage meant to mark the beginning of her bright future. Instead, it would become the opening chapter of a nightmare that would haunt her family, captivate the world, and leave a trail of questions that linger like ghosts in the tropical air. Natalee was the quintessential all-American girl, an honor student with a radiant smile, a member of the dance team, and a young woman with dreams as vast as the ocean that lapped at Aruba's shores. She had arrived on the island with over 100 classmates, chaperoned by a handful of adults, ready to bask in the sun-drenched freedom of this Caribbean paradise. The Holiday Inn where they stayed was a hub of youthful energy days spent lounging by the turquoise waves, nights erupting in the neon glow of Oranjestad's bars and clubs. But beneath the surface of this idyllic escape, something darker was brewing, something that would snatch Natalee from the world and plunge her family into an abyss of grief and obsession. The night of May 30 began like any other on the trip. Natalee and her friends poured into Carlos and Charlie's, a popular nightclub in the heart of Oranjestad. The air was thick with the scent of rum and sweat, the bass of reggae and pop vibrating through the crowded dance floor. Natalee, dressed in a light summer outfit, was seen laughing, drinking, and swaying to the music. Witnesses later described her as carefree, perhaps a little too trusting, her guard lowered by the island's laid-back charm. She was surrounded by familiar faces, classmates, her friends, but also by strangers, locals who moved through the crowd with an ease that made them blend in. Among them was a young man whose name would soon become synonymous with this tragedy, Joran van der Sloot. Joran was 17, a Dutch national living in Aruba, with a boyish charm that masked a troubling edge. Tall, with sharp features and an air of confidence, he was a regular at places like Carlos and Charlie's, where he gravitated toward American tourists, particularly young women. To Natalee, he might have seemed like just another friendly face, someone offering a fleeting connection in the haze of the night. But to those who knew him, Joran was a wild card, a privileged son of a prominent Aruban family, rumored to have a temper and a penchant for pushing boundaries. That night, he wasn't alone. With him were two Surinamese brothers, Deepak Kalpo, 21, and Satish Kalpo, 18, their presence adding to the uneasy alchemy of the evening. As the clock ticked past 1 a.m., Carlos and Charlie's began to wind down. Natalee was last seen by her friends at around 1:30 a.m., stepping outside the club into the humid night air. Surveillance footage would later capture a fleeting glimpse of her, climbing into a gray Honda sedan with Joran, Deepak, and Satish. The car pulled away, its taillights fading into the darkness, and with it, Natalee vanished. She was supposed to meet her classmates the next morning for their flight back to Alabama, but when the sun rose over the palm-lined beaches, she was nowhere to be found. Her bed at the Holiday Inn was untouched, her belongings left behind a passport, a packed suitcase, a life interrupted. Back in Mountain Brook, Alabama, Beth Holloway's phone rang just after dawn. It was one of the trip's chaperones, their voice trembling with panic. Natalee had missed the flight. She hadn't shown up at the airport, hadn't answered her phone, hadn't been seen since the night before. Beth's heart plummeted, a mother's instinct kicking in with a clarity that cut through the fog of disbelief. "I knew instantly," she later said, "that she'd either been kidnapped or murdered." There was no hesitation. Within hours, Beth was on a plane to Aruba, her mind racing with images of her daughter, her smile, her laugh, her life now teetering on the edge of an unthinkable void. Aruba, with its postcard-perfect beaches and reputation as a safe haven, was suddenly a labyrinth of secrets. The local police were quick to respond, but their efforts felt maddeningly slow to Beth and her ex-husband, Dave Holloway, who joined the search. They plastered the island with missing posters, Natalee's cherubic face staring out from every lamppost and storefront. The media descended like vultures, cable news networks, broadcasting live from the island, turning Natalee's disappearance into a global obsession. Was she still alive, hidden somewhere on the island? Had she been taken off Aruba, lost to a darker fate? Or was her body lying somewhere in the vast, unyielding ocean, forever out of reach? Suspicion fell almost immediately on Joran Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers. They admitted to being with Natalee that night, but their stories were slippery, shifting with each retelling. Joran claimed they had dropped Natalee off at the Holiday Inn around 2 a.m., saying she was approached by a man in a security guard uniform as they drove away. But hotel surveillance footage showed no sign of Natalee returning that night. The Kalpoes backed Joran's story at first, but cracks began to appear: vague timelines, conflicting details, a sense that they were holding something back. On the 9th of June, 2005, all three were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder, their mugshots flashing across television screens worldwide. Yet, without physical evidence or a body, the case stalled. By September, they were released, the investigation mired in frustration. Beth Holloway refused to let go. She confronted Joran herself, tracking him down in Aruba, staring into the eyes of the young man she believed had stolen her daughter. His demeanor was unsettling calm, almost smug, as if he knew more than he was saying. "Where is she?" Beth demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and desperation. Joran's responses were evasive, his lies piling up like sand dunes shifting in the wind. He spoke of leaving Natalee on a beach, of driving her to a lighthouse, of seeing her stumble drunk into the night. Each story was a dead end, each word a taunt that deepened the Holloway's torment. As weeks turned to months, the search for Natalee grew increasingly desperate. Divers scoured the ocean floor, police drained ponds, and volunteers combed the island's rugged interior. Tips poured in: sightings, rumors, false leads that led nowhere. A piece of duct tape with blonde hair was found on Aruba's northeast coast, sent to the FBI for testing, only to return a negative match. A gardener claimed to have seen Joran and the Kalpoes digging near a hotel, but searches yielded nothing. The island, once a symbol of paradise, began to feel like a prison, its beauty mocking the Holloway's grief. Behind the scenes, Joran's life was unraveling. His father, Paulus Sloot, a respected Aruban judge, was drawn into the spotlight, accused by Beth of shielding his son. Rumors swirled that Joran had been sent to a psychiatrist, that his family couldn't control his reckless behavior. Paulus himself was briefly arrested, though he was cleared of any wrongdoing. The media frenzy painted Joran as a predator, a young man with a dark side that had surfaced in the worst possible way. Yet, without a body or concrete evidence, he remained untouchable, a specter at the heart of the mystery. The Natalee Holloway case became more than a disappearance. It became a cultural phenomenon, a true crime saga that gripped the world. It was a story of innocence lost, of a mother's unrelenting quest for truth, of a suspect who seemed to revel in the chaos he'd created. Natalee's face haunted television screens, her story dissected in books, podcasts, and made-for-television movies. But beneath the headlines, there was a chilling reality. An 18-year-old girl had vanished into the night, and the man who knew what happened was still walking free. What had Joran done with Natalee? Was she still out there, hidden in some unimaginable place, or had the ocean claimed her forever? The answers seemed to lie in the shadows of Aruba's beaches, in the smirk of a young man who held the truth like a weapon. As Beth Holloway stood on the island, staring out at the endless sea, she felt the weight of a question that would define her life. Where was Natalee? The wind carried no answers, only the eerie silence of a mystery that refused to be solved. The neon lights of Oranjestad flickered like a siren's call, luring the reckless and the naive into the pulse of Aruba's nightlife. It was the summer of 2005, and Joran Sloot, the 17-year-old Dutch golden boy with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, was at the center of a storm that was about to engulf the island. Natalee Holloway, the 18-year-old from Mountain Brook, Alabama, had vanished into the night of May 30, her laughter silenced, her fate a question mark that hung heavy in the tropical air. Joran was the last person seen with her, and he was playing a dangerous Gamione part charmer, one part predator, and entirely too sloppy to be the mastermind he thought he was. If he was a spy in his own twisted narrative, he was a terrible one, leaving a trail of lies and missteps that would unravel like a cheap thriller, keeping the world hooked on every reckless move. Joran wasn't just a suspect, he was a spectacle. In the weeks following Natalee's disappearance, he strutted through Aruba like a rock star dodging paparazzi, his arrogance as intoxicating as the rum-soaked nights at Carlos and Charlie's. To the media swarming the island, he was a riddle wrapped in a smirka-privileged kid from a prominent family, son of Paulus Sloot, an Aruban judge who cast a long shadow. Joran's charm was his weapon, disarming reporters and investigators with a boyish grin that barely masked the chaos beneath. He'd toss out stories with the ease of a gambler bluffing at a poker table, each tale wilder than the last. One day, he'd claim he left Natalee on a moonlit beach, drunk but safe. The next, he'd spin a yarn about dropping her at the Holiday Inn, where a mysterious security guard whisked her away. His lies were a performance, and Aruba was his stage. Beth Holloway, Natalee's mother, wasn't buying the act. She'd flown from Birmingham, Alabama, her heart a furnace of grief and fury, determined to crack Joran's facade. She tracked him down in the days after Natalee vanished, confronting him in a moment that crackled with raw intensity. "Where is my daughter?" she demanded, her voice a blade slicing through his bravado. Joran's eyes flickered, but he held his ground, his answer slippery as the ocean waves. "I don't know," he said, his tone almost playful, as if daring her to push harder. Beth felt a chill, not from the island breeze, but from the realization that she was staring into the face of someone who thrived on control, someone who might hold the key to her daughter's fate, and was savoring the power of withholding it. The Aruban police, under pressure from the international spotlight, hauled Joran and his accomplices, Deepak and Satish Kalpoe, in for questioning. The Kalpoe brothers, quieter and less flamboyant, were Joran's shadows, their gray Honda sedan, the last place Natalee was seen alive. Their stories aligned with Joran's. At first Natalee was fine when they left her. They insisted, but the cracks were impossible to ignore. Deepak claimed they'd driven to a lighthouse with Natalee, while Joran swore they'd never left the main strip. Satish's timeline didn't match either, and the police sensed the trio was scrambling to cover something up. On the 9th of June, 2005, all three were arrested, their faces plastered across CNN and Fox News, the world watching as the net tightened around Aruba's most infamous trio. But Joran wasn't rattled. Behind bars, he was a chameleon, adapting to every interrogation with a new story. He'd flirt with detectives, crack jokes, and spin tales that seemed ripped from a bad crime novel. Maybe she fell off a cliff, he'd muse. Or maybe she ran off with someone. His nonchalance was infuriating, his confidence unshakable, as if he believed he was untouchable. And, in a way, he was. Without a body, a murder weapon, or any physical evidence tying him to a crime, the police were grasping at straws. By September, Joran and the Kalpoes were released. The case stalled in a quagmire of dead ends. The world screamed for justice, but Joran walked free, his smirk a taunt to everyone who wanted answers. What made Joran's performance so electrifying and so maddening was how close he came to slipping up. He was no criminal mastermind. He was a teenager with a big mouth and a bigger ego, leaving breadcrumbs of guilt everywhere he went. In bars across Oranjestad, he'd brag to locals about his adventures with American girls, his words dripping with a mix of bravado and menace. "They're so easy to pick up," he'd say, according to one witness, his eyes glinting with something dark. He'd drop hints about Natalee, vague but chilling, like a director teasing a sequel no one wanted to see. "She got what she deserved," he allegedly told a friend, though he'd later deny it, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. His recklessness was a tightrope act, and the world couldn't look away. The tension reached a fever pitch in early 2006 when Beth Holloway, now a fixture on American talk shows, teamed up with a private investigator from New York named TJ Ward. Ward was a bulldog, his Brooklyn accent cutting through the noise as he dug into Joran's life. He uncovered rumors that Joran had a history of predatory behavior, stories of him targeting young women at Aruba's casinos and clubs, using his charm to lure them into vulnerable situations. Ward's team tailed Joran, watching his every move, hoping he'd slip up. And slip up he did, in a way that sent shockwaves through the case. One night, in a dimly lit Aruban casino, Joran was caught on a hidden camera talking to a friend. The audio was grainy, but his words were clear enough to make Beth's blood run cold when she heard them. "She was drunk, man," Joran said, his voice low but casual. "We took her to the beach, and things got out of hand." The friend pressed him, but Joran clammed up, his laughter nervous, as if he'd realized he'd said too much. The footage wasn't enough to arrest him, it lacked context, and Joran's lawyers argued he was just talking big, but it was a bombshell. Cable news ran the clip on a loop, pundits dissecting every word, every inflection. Was this the confession everyone had been waiting for? Or was Joran just toying with the world, feeding the frenzy for his own amusement? The climax came in February 2006, when Dutch journalist Peter R. de Vries, a dogged investigator with a knack for breaking cases, entered the fray. De Vries, sensing Joran's ego was his Achilles heel, set a trap. He arranged for a Dutch undercover operative to befriend Joran, posing as a fellow partygoer in Aruba's nightlife scene. Over weeks, the operative gained Joran's trust, sharing drinks and stories until Joran let his guard down. One night, in a car wired with hidden cameras, the operative steered the conversation to Natalee. "What really happened, man?" he asked, his tone casual but probing. Joran, loosened by alcohol and arrogance, took the bait. "She was so drunk she couldn't walk," Joran said, his voice chillingly matter-of-fact. "We were on the beach, and she just stopped moving. I panicked, called a friend, and we got rid of her." The words hung in the air like a guillotine, sharp and final. The operative pressed for details, but Joran grew cagey, laughing it off as just a story. De Vries aired the footage on Dutch television, and the world erupted. Beth Holloway wept as she watched, her hope and horror colliding. Was this the truth, or another of Joran's twisted games? The Aruban authorities reviewed the tape, but their verdict was a gut punch. Without a body or corroborating evidence, Joran's words were legally meaningless. He wasn't arrested, and the case remained frozen. The resolution, if it could be called that, was bittersweet. Joran's reckless confessions had electrified the investigation, giving the Holloways a glimpse of the truth they craved. But it wasn't enough to bring Natalee home or put Joran behind bars. He slipped back into Aruba's nightlife, his infamy only growing, while Beth returned to Alabama, her resolve unbroken, but her heart heavier than ever. The world was left buzzing with questions. Was Joran a killer, or just a compulsive liar addicted to the spotlight? Had he revealed Natalee's fate, or was he stringing everyone along for the thrill? The answers seemed to dance just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of his terrible, tantalizing performance. Joran van der Sloot was no spy, but he was a master of chaos, his every move a spark that kept the Natalee Holloway mystery burning. As the sun set over Aruba, the island's beauty felt like a cruel disguise, masking a truth that refused to surface. Somewhere, in the whispers of the waves or the flicker of the casino's lights, Natalee's story was waiting to be told. And Joran, with his devil-may-care grin, was still holding the script. The Aruban night pulsed with a restless energy, its palm trees swaying under a sky studded with stars that seemed to whisper secrets. It was February 2008, nearly 3 years since Natalee Holloway, the 18-year-old from Mountain Brook, Alabama, vanished into the abyss of Oranjestad's nightlife. The world had watched, waited, and raged as Joran van der Sloot, the Dutch teenager with a serpent's charm, danced around the truth, his lies a twisted serenade that kept Natalee's fate just out of reach. But now, a new player had entered the gamma, Dutch journalist with a hunger for justice and a plan to trap Joran in his own web. The stage was set for a climax that would electrify the Natalee Holloway case, a moment so raw, so tantalizing, that it would send shivers down the spine of everyone who heard it. Joran van der Sloot was 20 now, his boyish features hardened by years of scrutiny, but his arrogance burned brighter than ever. He moved through Aruba's casinos and bars like a fallen prince, untouchable despite the world's suspicion. In Mountain Brook, Alabama, Beth Holloway clung to hope, her nights haunted by visions of her daughter's smile, her days consumed by a quest for answers. The case had grown cold, the Aruban police stymied by a lack of evidence, the media's frenzy dulled to a simmer. But Beth's fire never wavered, and her resolve had drawn the attention of Peter R. de Vries, a Dutch investigative journalist whose reputation for cracking impossible cases was legendary. De Vries saw Joran not as a mastermind, but as a narcissist, a man whose ego was a ticking bomb waiting to detonate, and he knew exactly how to light the fuse. De Vries's plan was as audacious as it was meticulous. He enlisted Patrick van der Eem, a charismatic Dutch businessman with a knack for blending into any crowd. Vanderiem's mission was simple but dangerous. Befriend Joran, gain his trust, and coax him into revealing what happened to Natalee. It was a high-stakes seduction, a psychological chess game played in the smoky backrooms of Aruba's underworld. Vanderiem approached Joran in late 2007, posing as a fellow thrill-seeker, a kindred spirit who shared Joran's taste for fast cars, late nights, and the rush of bending rules. Joran, ever the showman, took the bait, drawn to Vanderiem's easy confidence, like a moth to a flame. They bonded over drinks, swapped stories, and cruised the island in Vanderiem's Cara vehicle, secretly rigged with hidden cameras and microphones. Every word and gesture captured for the world to see. The tension built slowly, each meeting a step closer to the edge. Vanderiem played his role to perfection, laughing at Joran's crude jokes, nodding at his boasts, and subtly steering conversations toward Natalee. Joran was cagey at first, deflecting with his usual mix of charm and evasion. "People just won't let it go," he'd say, rolling his eyes as if Natalee's disappearance was a minor inconvenience. But Vanderiem was patient, letting Joran's guard slip with every shared cigarette, every shot of rum. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions, the weight of Natalee's absence, a shadow that grew darker with each passing night. Beth Holloway, unaware of the sting operation, continued her crusade in Alabama, speaking at vigils and talk shows, her voice a beacon that seemed to echo across the ocean, urging the truth to surface. The climax came on a humid night in early 2008, the kind of night where the Aruban heat clung to your skin like a lover's touch. Joran and Vanderiem were sprawled in the car, the windows cracked, the scent of marijuana lingering in the air. The hidden cameras hummed, their lenses trained on Joran's face as Vanderiem leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Come on, man," he said, a grin masking his intent. "What really happened with that American girl? You can tell me." Joran hesitated, his eyes flickering with a mix of bravado and unease. Then, as if the weight of his secrets was too much to bear, he let the mask slip. "She was drunk, completely out of it," Joran said, his voice eerily calm, like he was recounting a mundane day. "We were on the beach, just messing around, and she just stopped breathing. I didn't know what to do." Vanderiem's pulse quickened, but he kept his cool, nudging Joran to keep talking. "So what'd you do with her?" he asked, his tone casual but hungry. Joran leaned back, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "I called a friend. He had a boat. We took her out to sea and dumped her. She's gone, man. No one's ever gonna find her." The words landed like a thunderclap, each syllable a knife twisting in the heart of Natalee's mystery. Vanderiem pressed for details. Where was the boat? Who was the friend? But Joran grew vague, his laughter sharp and nervous, as if he'd realized he'd crossed a line. The footage was a bombshell, a raw, unfiltered glimpse into Joran's mind. De Vries knew he had gold, but he also knew it was fragile. He edited the recordings with surgical precision, ensuring every damning word was clear. On the 3rd of February, 2008, the Netherlands erupted as De Vries aired the footage on his television show. Peter R. De Vries, crime reporter. The world watched, breathless, as Joran's confession played out in grainy, heart-stopping detail. In Mountain Brook, Beth Holloway sat frozen in front of her television, tears streaming down her face as she heard the man she'd long suspected describe her daughter's fate with chilling detachment. "I felt her pain," Beth later said, her voice trembling. "I felt Natalee in that moment, alone, discarded." The media exploded. Cable news networks from New York to Los Angeles replaying the clip on a loop, pundits and viewers alike gripped by a mix of horror and fascination. The fallout was immediate and chaotic. In Aruba, protesters gathered outside Joran's family home, demanding his arrest. In Alabama, Natalee's classmates held candlelight vigils, their grief reignited by the confession. The Aruban authorities, under global scrutiny, reopened the case, hauling Joran in for questioning. He was defiant, his smirk replaced by a scowl as he claimed the confession was a lie, a story he'd made up to impress Vanderiem. "I was high, I was joking," he insisted. But his words rang hollow, his credibility shattered. The Calpo brothers, still lingering in the case's periphery, distanced themselves, their own stories shifting yet again. The world held its breath, waiting for the handcuffs to click. for justice to finally claim the man who'd toyed with Natalee's memory for years. But the resolution was a gut-wrenching letdown. The Aruban legal system, constrained by its reliance on concrete evidence, deemed the confession inadmissible. Joran's words, while horrifying, lacked corroboration. No body, no boat, no witness to confirm the story. The friend he mentioned was never identified, and searches of Aruba's coastal waters turned up nothing. De Vries, furious but undeterred, released more footage, including Joran's casual admission that he felt no remorse. "It's like she never existed," Joran said in one clip, his voice a chilling void. But even this wasn't enough. By late 2008, Joran was free again. The case once more stalled in a maddening limbo. The confession had been a lightning bolt, illuminating the truth for a fleeting moment before plunging it back into darkness. Beth Holloway returned to Alabama, her heart a battlefield of hope and despair. The confession had given her a glimpse of closure, a painful but vivid picture of Natalee's final moments. Yet it also deepened the agony, confirming her worst fears while denying her justice. Joran, meanwhile, leaned into his infamy, fleeing Aruba for Thailand and Peru, where his dark impulses would soon lead to another tragedy. The world moved on, but Natalee's story lingered, a siren song of mystery and loss that refused to fade. Had Joran told the truth, or was the confession just another layer of his endless deception? The answer seemed to drift in the Aruban tides, tantalizingly close, but forever out of reach. The 2008 confession was a high-wire act, a moment that promised to unravel the Natalee Holloway case, but left it more enigmatic than ever. It was a story of seduction and betrayal, of a mother's unyielding love and a suspect's chilling audacity. As the stars blinked over Oranjestad, they seemed to mock the world below, guarding the secret of Natalee's fate with a silence that was both beautiful and cruel. The Aruban moon hung low, casting a silver glow over the beaches, where secrets seemed to whisper in the sand. It was 2010, 5 years since Natalee Holloway, the 18-year-old from Mountain Brook, Alabama, vanished into the neon haze of Oranjestad's nightlife. The world had been captivated, tormented, and tantalized by the mystery of her disappearance, with Joran van der Sloot, the Dutch enigma with a devil's charm, at its heart. His 2008 confession, those chilling words captured on hidden camera shot, promised to crack the case wide open, only to leave it shrouded in deeper shadows. Now, as the saga hurtled toward a new chapter, the air crackled with anticipation, desire, and dread. Where was Natalee? Was Joran's truth buried in his lies? Or was the answer drifting somewhere in the Caribbean's endless tides? The stage was set for a finale that would leave the world breathless, yearning for more. Beth Holloway, Natalee's mother, had become a warrior forged in grief. Her life, a relentless quest for her daughter's truth. From her home in Birmingham, Alabama, she channeled her pain into action, founding organizations to protect young travelers and speaking on national stages, her voice a beacon that refused to dim. Yet, every lead, every tip, every flicker of hope had led to the same dead end. Joran van der Sloot, now 22, a man who seemed to thrive on the chaos he'd sown. He'd fled Aruba, bouncing between Thailand, Colombia, and Peru. His infamy, a dark halo that drew both fear and fascination. Joran was no longer the boyish suspect of 2005. He was a specter, his name synonymous with a mystery that had gripped the world like a fever dream. In early 2010, the case took a shocking turn, one that felt ripped from a thriller's darkest pages. Beth, working with investigators from New York and Alabama, orchestrated a sting operation that was as bold as it was desperate. Joran had contacted Beth's legal team, offering to reveal Natalee's fate for a price. He demanded $250,000, with an initial payment of $25,000, claiming he'd disclose the location of Natalee's body and the details of her death. Beth's heart raced with a mix of hope and revulsion, but she saw an opportunity to trap the man who'd haunted her for years. Working with the FBI, she agreed to the deal, setting a meeting in Aruba that would be wired for sound and video, every moment a potential key to unlocking the truth. The meeting was a high-wire act, charged with a seductive danger. Joran arrived in Oranjestad, his confidence unshaken, his eyes glinting with the thrill of control. He met with Beth's intermediary, a seasoned operative from Mobile, Alabama, in a hotel room overlooking the turquoise sea. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your pulse quicken. Joran, dressed in a crisp shirt that belied his fugitive lifestyle, spoke with a chilling calm. "I'll tell you where she is," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "But you know it's not pretty." He claimed Natalee had died on the beach, her body disposed of in a way that ensured she'd never be found. He hinted at a construction site near Aruba's Bubali Place, a marshy area where a hotel was being built in 2005. "They poured her into the foundation," he said, his words a knife twisting in the operative's gut. The cameras captured every syllable, every smirk, as Joran accepted the $25,000 in cash, unaware that the FBI was watching from a command center in Miami. Beth, monitoring the operation from Alabama, felt a surge of hope, tempered by the sickening realization that Joran might be playing her again. The money was wired, the trap sprung, and Joran was arrested in Aruba on charges of wire, fraud, and extortion. The world buzzed with excitement that Joran finally slipped up. Would this lead to Natalee's remains? To the closure Beth had chased for half a decade. Cable news networks from Atlanta to Los Angeles ran the story nonstop, pundits speculating about the construction site, about Joran's motives, about whether Natalee's body was truly entombed in concrete. The climax came in June 2010, as Aruban authorities, under global pressure, launched a massive search of the Bubali Place area. Excavators tore into the earth. Divers plunged into the nearby marshes, and Beth stood watch, her heart pounding with every churn of the soil. The media swarmed, cameras capturing the surreal scene, a tropical paradise transformed into a crime scene. Its beauty, a cruel contrast to the grim task at hand. Days turned to weeks, the search yielding nothing but mud and frustration. No body, no evidence, no trace of Natalee. Joran's story, like so many before it, began to crumble. He claimed he'd lied to extort money, that he'd never meant a word of it. "I needed cash," he told investigators, his smirk returning like a ghost. The fraud charges held, but without physical evidence, the murder case remained a mirage, shimmering just out of reach. The resolution was a bittersweet torment. Joran was extradited to the US, facing charges in Birmingham, Alabama, for the extortion scheme. It was a victory, but a hollow one. Natalee's fate was still unknown, her mother's pain unassuaged. In a twist that added fuel to the saga's fire, Joran's life took a darker turn just before his arrest. On May 30, 2010, exactly 5 years to the day of Natalee's disappearance, he murdered Stephanie Flores, a 21-year-old Peruvian woman, in a Lima hotel room. The crime, brutal and impulsive, seemed to confirm what many had long suspected. Joran was capable of violence, perhaps even of killing Natalee. He was convicted in Peru, sentenced to 28 years, but he offered no new answers about Natalee, his silence a final taunt. Beth returned to Mountain Brook, her resolve unbroken, but her soul scarred. She stood on her porch, staring at the Alabama stars, wondering if Natalee was out there, in the ocean's depths or the island's hidden corners. The 2010 sting had been a roller coaster, a fleeting chance at justice that left more questions than answers. Was Joran's story about the construction site true, or just another lie to toy with Beth's heart? Had Natalee been lost to the sea, as he'd claimed in 2008, or was she closer than anyone knew? The mystery pulsed like a heartbeat, alive and insatiable, drawing the world into its orbit. The Natalee Holloway case was no longer just a tragedy, it was a siren song, a tale of loss and obsession that refused to end. Joran, locked away in a Peruvian prison, remained the keeper of the truth, his motives as murky as the Aruban marshes. Beth, in Alabama, vowed to keep searching, her love for Natalee a flame that no darkness could extinguish. And somewhere, in the whispers of the Caribbean wind, or the shadows of a Birmingham night, Natalee's story waited to be told. What happened to Natalee? Is Joran hiding the final piece of the puzzle, or is the truth lost forever? The answers are out there, teasing us from the edges of this electrifying mystery. Stay tuned to our channel for the next chapter, where we'll dive deeper into the enigma of Natalee Holloway's story that's far from over.